Hey everybody, how you doing? I am here to go live with Mr. Devon Bandison, who should have gotten his in by now. He will be here any minute. We have a whole minute before we officially go at our live time. So let's see if he's coming on.
Can you see me?
All right, let's see. I can see you. Can you see me?
Yes, we're
All
on.
right. Here we are, people. So let's see who's going to join us today. We have lots of fun things to talk with you about for the final conversation of our Facebook Live. So, oh, Melissa Ward is with us. Melissa, nice to see you.
Hey,
Glad
Melissa.
you're here. Yep. Melissa was at the CFJ school a couple of years ago. She is a fabulous coach and person who is now based in, I think she's in Vegas. So we're going to get started any moment with the official start time, but Devon and I are becoming very strong Facebook Live users, getting on it, knowing how to get us both here. So exciting.
You like my my mood lighting in the background?
It's interesting. I think we're here. It is 12 noon. So we are officially going to start the final Facebook Live in the Creating Greater Impact, Income, and Transformation in Your Coaching Business with myself, Carolyn Freyer-Jones, and none other than Devon Bandison. And Devon, I don't see much green happening.
Oh, well, I had to break out. I'm like a block away from the St. Patrick's Day parade. So I'm literally in Midtown Manhattan because I got my game changer this weekend. So I had to break out my special Kobe Bryant greens today for the occasion.
All right. We'll let you have it. We'll let you have it. All right. That's fair. That's fair. So Alex is with us too. And
Hey, Alex.
oh yeah, see Linda, who goes by Ed Leland, is asking where's the green. So you might need to occasionally wave the sneaker, Devon, just so that people
All right.
that you're on it. All right. So here we are. We want to do a check-in first. Like first, let me give some context. So this is the third conversation of 3 where Devon is a highly successful leadership coach. He does lots of work in corporate. He works with individuals. He works with athletes on their mental strength. And he also runs his own events. The one he just mentioned is happening starting tomorrow, right?
It's on tomorrow, Friday through Sunday.
Right. And
NYC, the game changer.
Right. That's a 2-day game changer. And I have lots of different kinds of people I coach. I coach executives. I coach regular people who have small businesses. I coach creative people. And I also, in other sections of my life, do a lot of work with coaches, right? In the growth of their business specifically through the CFJ Coaching Success School. However, the work that Devon and I decided to partner together to do was to do more work with coaches around what does it mean to do deep coaching? Like, how do you create more impact in your practice? It's something Devon and I had talked about on and off for way more than 2 years, but then we decided we wanted to do an event that really would be different than any other event for coaches, where coaches could come and in the span of 2 days, really learn how to deepen and create more impact in their coaching and create more transformation. And what happens as a result of that is you do create more income. That's just a natural result of that. So last week we gave everyone an assignment. So Devon, should we find out if anybody did it and what it was like?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. I know there are some people here. So the assignment.
And by the way, I see Alex. Alex is excited about the main event. Like he's like 2 weeks. Let's go. That's right. 2 weeks. We're getting a lot of these emails and texts of the excitement of the event. And to Carolyn's point, this is going to be for the coaching industry, something that has never been seen before. So we've been tuned in to what's out there, and we think there's a big need in this area of really what truly transformative and deep coaching is, and becoming a better coach. And it's really, this is why I love our profession, because it's the only profession that I know that pays you to learn more about yourself. And the more you can go inward and learn about yourself, the more you can be of service to others.
Yep.
So back to you around the homework assignment.
Yeah. So I know there are more people, like, just put in the comments if you're here, right? I think Caitlin is here. And I think a couple, so let us know you're here. We just want to know you're here. So remember, the assignment from last week was, what words did you double click on more? Like, did you double click on anything new? Did you double click on words you might not have before? Like, did you double click on try? Did you double click on should? Did you double click on, what else did we talk about? Up for, yeah. Ours is,
yeah, well, and we want to give, for people who didn't join last week, but the people who did the homework, is like the context of double clicking is like, we really talked about listening. Like what are we listening for? And how can we slow down a conversation and really double click on words to open up like new screens, right? It's like a mouse that you double click on, a whole new screen comes up, right? And so the homework was to look at, in your coaching conversations, what did you notice about where you were double clicking? What were you focused on? So, hi, Arza. So in the comment section, 1, let us know if you did the homework, and 2, what did you notice? Alex says, I definitely double clicked on create this week and slowed down with exploring those possibilities with a potential client. Well done, Alex.
so I'll share, as people are putting in their answers, I just had a coaching session with an executive that I coach, and she kept using the word time. Well, it's time. Time is the issue. And I was like, so let's slow down this word, time. Like, it seems like you're using it in a context of, it's like a limited resource that you don't have any of. Mm-hmm. Right? So that became a whole conversation where I was like, this is not about time for your consideration. This is about your want to, right? This is about your want to. Oh, okay. Linda is saying, who goes by Ed Leland, Devon, I picked up more on concerning words like pressure. It's great.
Yeah.
I double clicked on what sounded like disempowering beliefs.
Yeah. John double clicked on fine and busy, fine. That's a great, what is fine?
Right. And Devon, I love that you talk about the screen that opens up when we double click, right? So it's not just double clicking on the word. It's like it opens up new screens, not on the outside of someone, on the inside of someone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's like, so if Ed talked about the pressure, right? You said, and it's like, tell me more about the pressure. What does that mean? How does it occur for you? Yep. And then it's like a whole, instead of just, rushing past something, you stay with it, you double click, and then a whole new screen opens up. Yep. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that can take a conversation and a session in a whole different way. Right? And like, we want to invite you to, I double clicked on the change in body language, going from fidgety to slow and vice versa. That's really fun. So that's great, Jennifer. I love that you did that, right? Because that's another place to look at, right? The body. Yesterday, I was on a joint call with Devon with some people that we coach, and he double clicked on what was happening in someone's face. He was like, hey, I'm noticing that you don't look that happy, but what you're sharing is a win. So he double clicked on her facial expression, and he was accurate. So the win and her facial expression they weren't lining up.
Right.
So it's a really beautiful thing to do. It's a way to deepen what's happening beyond the word level. Right? That's what we're all going for. We don't want to just listen at the word level. We want to get what's the content below the word, right? And what does that word even mean to someone?
Yeah.
So this is great. So
And double clicking is really just a great context in which to upgrade your listening as a coach, right? So if you want to upgrade your listening and awareness as a coach, there's a different listening when you're really looking to slow it down and open a new window with somebody. And one of the biggest things I think that new like coaches who don't go beyond the surface is they're going too fast, right? So if you want to, it's like, what's the question below the question? What's the issue below the issue? Because most people, especially new clients, a lot of people come in just like, they come in off the street with a mask, right? So they're going to share initially what they've been sharing for a while in family barbecues, what they're comfortable with, right? And it's up to you to really listen and see, one, I love the body language, right? Does the audio match the video? And we double click on that. And like really listening for insight and impact and double clicking on those kind of words. So
I just want to
it's a
say,
great.
Paula's here. We have to acknowledge her from Ireland. I was worried. I didn't see her, and she's here again.
Paula.
So, phew, I feel better.
Welcome, Paula.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. You've come every week. So everyone who's come every week, I think Alex has come every week. I think Paula's come every week. I think Jennifer Butler. Yep. So, wow, good for you. Because that says a lot about your own, like, hey, I want to keep learning. I want to keep trying stuff.
And one of the things, like what I love and why everyone deserves a shout out for that, it's like, it's something that we're really going to go deep into at the main event. And just the opportunity to like really understand what it means to be a master coach and how to sharpen the saw, right? How do you get better at the craft of coaching? Not just from coaching and being coached, which is two huge factors, but like, what are the things that you and I do that I can't wait to share that part and the exercise we have for the main event and that part? Like, how do we show up and are we invested in becoming great at our craft?
Right.
Like, are we immersing ourselves in the profession so we could be at our best for ourselves and for our clients? And I often use like the story of like when I played college basketball as a good basketball player, how I learned to become a good basketball player was I used to watch and study like just for hours, great basketball players. Then I'd go out and I'd mimic their moves for a while. And then eventually I got my own game. But like in coaching, it's the same thing. It's like I watched and said, who's the best in the game? I went to their events. I studied under them. At first, I go to Byron Katie, and the first thing I'd ask when I come back is like, is that true? Right? So I'd mimic them, and then eventually it just became part of my toolbox, and it just became part of the range in which I could go anywhere with a client when they're their agenda and use that as the modality. So I just acknowledge people for just taking this hour and what it takes in the middle of the day to show up and be in this conversation with us.
That's right. And one thing I want to say, because it's important to me that Devon and I both say, like, I've been in the game a long time, but like, I'm still on my own path to mastery, as is Devon. We're not like, we're done. We're not, you know what I mean? Nor in like the people that we learn from, whether it's Steve Chandler or Nancy Klein or Mary Hulnick or Byron Katie, like they would, if they were here with us, they'd be like, oh no, I'm still learning. Like I'm still like in the game of learning new things for me. So I want to be clear about that. Like that's not like a finite, it's not a place we arrive.
No, it's just it's a mountain with no top. I remember being in a retreat in California the week COVID hit with Steve Chandler, and he's the godfather of coaching, and he's still invested in himself. Or when you go with Ron and Mary, I show up and Steve Hardison has stuff outlined in what he's studying. Like it's the mountain with no top, and that's the beauty of this game. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so let's see how they did on the other homework. Anybody who was here last week, the home assignment. So the other home assignment was notice where you get irritated. Notice where you get irritated. So I'm curious if anybody noticed anything, places they got irritated, which is code for I'm triggered or I don't like what's happening here. Those of you who are on my email list got the email this week. I think it went out yesterday about the client that I discovered. I actually was like, I don't know if I like this guy, right? So that obviously brought into my coaching session with my coach. Do we need to like our clients? Is that a requirement? Right? So where did you notice that you got irritated? If you did, and maybe you didn't. We have other new stuff we're going to talk with you about today. This is just, we want to make sure we handle the assignments, because that's the kind of coaches Devon and I are. We don't just give out assignments and not find out if they happen.
Yeah, and I don't, we don't just give assignments. Like, I give thought to the assignments we give too. It's like, I remember early on, like, what irritated me is like any version, you know, I grew up and my mom, I think it was a motivating factor, used to always say, don't be a martyr.
Oh,
Right? That was like, so that was ingrained in me. Like, if something went on, don't be a martyr. Like, nobody's feeling sorry for you. And early on in my coaching, like when something showed up and occurred as like someone being like victim, like coming from victim mentality, not that they weren't victimized, but like some kind of version of martyr, you know, being a martyr or a victim, it would irritate me sometimes. And I had to find my way to relax into and be patient with that and come from really a neutral place of love. And you know, but I remember early on that would be a trigger for me when like someone would go right into like victimy, and that was just from how I grew up.
yeah.
So and the beauty is the awareness of that is like, that's where you get better. If you allow yourself to be honest with that assessment and say, ooh, this really triggers me, right? They're acting, oh my God, woe is me. And yet, how can I show love, compassion, and really be with them and not make it about me, make it about the client I'm with?
Oh, we got some answers. Some people,
yep.
You take a look, Devon.
I have a reciprocal peer coach who has the same issues and readily admits not acting on the steps she came up with requests I made. Oh, it's moving. I'm trying to read and it's moving.
I know. You gotta be
it
fast.
Feels like a repeating loop. However, I recognized I lost it. Yeah. So Ed, I get impatient when I think a client is not getting it, or in the blame game. I'm recovering control freak. Good, Deborah. Jennifer, I don't have an irritation right now, but I worked with a client 6 months that always irritated me, seemed uninterested all the time. He learned and grew and did amazing things, but man, he irritated me. Emma gave a shout out for your email.
Yeah.
Be the coach your client needs to be. It's really great.
And Alethea had when someone's being flaky or ghosting me. And then Melissa had when my client says, I read this book, my friends are suggesting this, right? So let's see if we can like slow all this down a little bit, right? Because there's a lot in here and there may be similar themes. And this brings up kind of what we were going to talk about today anyway, this idea of how do we be an agendaless coach? How do we be an agendaless coach? But it's like this idea, right? Like sometimes we can get over invested in being the only one that is like having influence in our clients' lives, right? Like, you know, I'm thinking of what Melissa wrote. Like if a client's like, I read this book, someone said I should read it, but it's not like a book I put in their world or said, hey, I want you to read this. So I'm thinking that, like, you know, this idea of like, I get impatient when I think the client is not getting it. So Deborah says, I'm a recovering control freak, right? So I would hazard a guess, Devon, that if you and I did like a survey, that how many coaches in the profession would say that they have potential, let's call it healed or somewhat unhealed control issues? What do you think?
Say that again. I was just reading a comment. I'm thinking I have a funny one for this comment, but go ahead. Say that again, Carolyn.
What's the percentage of coaches who have healed or unhealed control issues?
Oh, I think we're in the, you know, I think we're up in the upper like 80, 90%. You know, I think that it's really a work to let go of that, right? And to truly show up empty. you know, and show up empty is a gift, to be able to show up empty with a client and allow the agenda to be created in your listening with your client. So if I'm bringing my lens and my agenda, then my listening for that is going to come through that lens. So I think that letting go of the control, you know, there's a great, somebody once, my man Goody used to say, control is impossible the moment it is suggested. Mm. And so sometimes when we drop control and we drop agenda, we're able to just be present, and there's so much that can be created from having no agenda, from showing up empty, from like creating from the listening of the client, because truly they are the agenda. And a lot of times when people take control over things, they subtly and not so subtly put their own agenda and their own view on things, and they're kind of guiding clients to a certain way that they think it should be, instead of allowing it to get created.
Right. I think that's fabulous, because I did so much of that. Like, I was like, you know, and I did it, you know, obviously with my intentions were in the right place, but it was like, I wasn't as conscious of that part of me, right, at the time, where I was like, part of me was really wrapped up in doing a good job, right? Like, I want to do, and that meant I know where this person, or I think I know where they need to go. I think I know.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Well, I'll share my story, and then Devon has a story to share about like each a time where we may have had our own agenda running and it got in the way. Melissa says, the client's not listening to me. I liked Paula's story, you know, and I know Devon can relate to that, you know, where like a client's in a situation where somebody in their life is not treating them well. And we as the coach or the therapist are like, that person, they're a jerk. Like, we get mad at the person in the client's life, right? Which means we're, you know, sometimes that's really helpful, right? For our clients to hear us go, did you think that person was being a jerk? Because I kind of did. That can be really freeing, but there's times where we're really like in it with them in a way that's not helpful. So I'll share my story. I was in an enrollment process with this guy who was a small business owner, really nice guy. I liked him a lot. And I don't know, maybe we'd had 2 conversations, and he writes to me with this email, like, tell me more about what your approach is. I was like, oh my God, I don't like, what is that? What do you mean? What's my approach? And I of course wrote to my coach, Steve Chandler. I was like, what do I do here? Like, what do I even say? And Steve, just being the godfather he is, was like, you want to be really clear with this person. There is no approach. You will use anything and everything to assist them in their transformation. You don't use one approach, and they are the agenda. There's no agenda other than them and what they bring in the room. And I was like, oh, that's really good. That's good. And I have strived to stay in that, right? And with my own evolution as a coach, right? And there are times I've been blindsided by my agenda, right? And when I have, see, that's to me also part of it. Are we willing to own when we've fallen off the wagon on being agendaless and we've moved too quickly and think we know what would be best here. And it can happen in an instant. Like, in a moment, a client can be like, that's not what I meant. That's not what I was seeking. That's not what I'm asking you. Do you want to share your story, Devon?
Yeah, and I think that in the beginning, as you're starting your practice, I think it lends itself more to, like Carolyn saying, unconscious, but it can be also like just in the moment, a missed opportunity, right? Where the agenda you have oftentimes that pops up comes from a really great place. So like, for instance, I had a client a while back who, in any aspect of, if you were to like look at how she showed up in the world, highly uplifted, highly like a spiritual practice, like really understood that the issue is not the issue, it's how we relate. So she was sharing a deep-rooted traumatic thing that was going on in her family for a number of years. And that quickly, like I'm present, that quickly, the agenda of like I put her as further along in this situation, because I assume because she's been really spiritually uplifted and does a lot of work and really gets through things really powerfully, no matter what it is. I jumped to the conclusion that this was a similar situation. And just that split second, I missed the opportunity to hear that she was really still in it, still in the process of it, still in like the not ready to see the other side of it. And I went to kind of the other side too quick with her of like, you know, a year from now, we all usually look back and say, hey, this is very tough, and it was the best thing that happened to me. And this is why, like, this is what I learned. And she wasn't ready for that. And it really kind of paused, like she really took a step back in the coaching, and she wrote, you know, and became a little distant for a while, and wrote an email and was like, hey, that didn't land well for me. This is what I heard it as, and that wasn't my intention. So as a coach, you want to stay in the game and be a stand for people, because I was coming from a great place and was being a stand, and I kind of jumped the gun because the agenda of like, hey, she's really got this, and it was the best thing that happened. She's like, you know, one of the top coaches in the world. Like, she's amazing in our work that we continue to do, and it was a great learning experience. And for me as a coach, I had to go back and say, hey, that wasn't my intention, and I take full responsibility. You know, I take full responsibility. I blew that one. I blew that. And you're absolutely right. And a lot of, you know, for me to go back and share that there was something that brought us closer together because of taking full ownership of that situation. And I think that is also really a great part of this profession, that nobody's expecting you to be perfect. And when you fall short, or maybe you made a misstep where it didn't land, as a coach, you want to be confident enough that the relationship will endure. And I found that it does when you take full ownership and you acknowledge people. And it was great. And I think, to me, it was one of the best coaching experiences I've had.
And it wasn't an easy one.
It wasn't easy. Wasn't easy.
No. And I think that's really important to talk about, right? That, like, that's part of why, if you're not on my email list and you want to be getting them, I let everyone know I'm going to email every day this week, might be even every day next week. I haven't decided yet. But like every day, my intention is to either share a story or something that will assist you in going further in your coaching, right? Having greater impact. And I think one of the most important things to know is, like, there's going to be, like, Devon had to really face a tough look at himself in that moment, a tough look at like, what was I doing in that moment that I missed that, and how am I gonna repair this? So Devon had to get on the court with repairing, and he had to be patient with where the client was, but he also had to be real honest with himself and with them, right? So that's learning how to do that is a skill. That's not like, oh, okay, great. It's like, no. It doesn't just happen. It's like, it happens through making mistakes and learning from them, right? So what we want to talk with you about today, so like, we want you to play with, can you show up at your next coaching session without an agenda inside of you, without an agenda about how you anything, and really look for the subtleties of like any frustrations that you want your client to be moving faster, or seeing something that they're not seeing, right? Or getting something that they're not getting. To really consider, that's always an opportunity for us. It's like, how can I see this differently so then I can show it to them differently? Like, when a client is not getting it, I'm always like, you know what? This is on me. I'm not, there's another way I need to show this, because I'm not explaining it well. I'm always in the inquiry of like, how can I show this or share this differently so they might see it? And then there are times where it's like, maybe they don't need to see what I think they need to see.
Right.
And am I willing to consider that? Am I willing to consider that? Devon, I think you brought up something really important that we can slow down on, and it comes from your client story. So, you know, you had a lot of trust already built up with that client, right? There was a lot of trust in the bank account. Yeah. And there are times in a coaching relationship where, as coaches, we need, and it would be of value for us to reflect something to the client that they potentially will find uncomfortable. They might not like it. It might require them looking at themselves in a new way that might not feel easy for them. And in particular, I was in a situation where you shared about when you're in group situations, right? Whether it's in a corporate setting or you're running a group, and you shared about how often there is someone in the group that tends to trigger or irritate people. And often it's the same person who at some point probably needs to hear some feedback in some way. And can you share more about your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's important because, you know, I run a lot of groups, the Game Changers, and then also in organizations. And it came, you know, we had a conversation with a group we're coaching, the All-Star team, and someone brought it up around working with a team that had one of the people who were just not bought into anything. You know, they were like, I feel attacked. I'm not part of this. And her plan was like, you know, to go in and coach, you know, coach just on whatever the context, the concepts that the initial agenda was on. And for me, I want to slow down and understand what's already in the room. So if every time you have a group or you're in a company, there's usually going to be one person who triggers other people. There's usually going to be one person who's like resistant. You're going to get the people who's all in and they're up for it, they're inspired. And then there's going to be like the real skeptical one. And to me, I love the skeptical one. I don't make the skeptical one wrong. And I think that a lot of times, a couple things happen. As a coach, when you're leading a group, you already know the dynamics. You can feel it and see it, that these people are being triggered by this one person. And a lot of the big mistake that a lot of coaches make is they fall into subtly the groupthink, and they leak. Like they give some subtle kind of like wink, not like physical wink, but they give this subtle nod to kind of agree with the other people that this person is triggering. And then what happens when you lead a group like that is you lose respect. You think you're connecting with people, but eventually they'll say, well, if she's judgmental or he's judgmental of that person, how do I trust that he won't be judgmental with me? So the first thing when you're leading a group and someone's triggering you is you don't want to fall in. You may have your own things that come up, but you don't want to allow that to leak into how you're being with the people. That's number one. And then you may identify that, like, in the, you know, I remember this person was saying there's this 6-week program. So, you know, you may identify that this person is very resistant, but you want to build trust in that group. So you don't want to, like, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You don't want to do that. Like, allow them their process, keep building with the group, build trust. And then eventually, if that person is really holding the group back, when trust has been deposited, then it's time sometimes to call people out and saying, hey, we got to pause here. What's occurring here is real resistance. I see that it's occurring, and are you open to explore that with me? Can we slow that down? And sometimes you got to call people out, but you can't call them out too early if you don't have trust deposited. And you don't want to call people out if you're leaking and like letting off that this person bothers you. You're in a leadership position. You're going to have the conversations in your client's life and in people's lives that nobody in their life has. It's a big honor. It's a big honor and it's a big responsibility. So you want to create the space in order to do that from really a powerful position. And when coach through it, I got an email. We got an email this morning of like, it was the best session. They loved it. They loved that she changed the whole agenda and really addressed what was in the room. Yeah. So it's very important when you're a coach is there's leadership in your coaching. And sometimes leadership is to see things. It's like a good point guard on the basketball court. You don't have to say everything you see initially. You have to see how the game is being played, how much trust is in the room, and when's the time to make that it's really going to impact that person and the group. So
yeah,
yeah.
So let's see if people have either questions about that or if they have thoughts. Like, questions are great, right? Because we're here to help you deepen your coaching today, right? So to really slow down what Devon talked about, right? So whether it's with an individual client or in a group, there has to be enough trust built before you might be saying, hey, I want to reflect something to you. I want to slow down something I'm seeing, right? It's like when we go too fast, that can create an erosion. And Devon was able to repair that with his client because of the level of trust. If it had not been there, maybe not, right? Because it can have gone too far too fast. So I really want to say, like, where are the challenges? Like, and it's a fine line, right? Because some of what we're going to be doing in the main event, one thing I want to say, because I'm so excited about this. So we've come up with this whole exercise where you get to evaluate where you are in your coaching. And I'm really excited for coaches to get to do that, like to do a self-evaluation of where you are. And one of the things is to look at, like, well, where am I? Am I aware of how critical trust is in the coaching relationship? Am I aware of that? And do I consciously build trust with my client, right? Do you do that? Some people do it intuitively, and that's beautiful. And there's a lot of value in actually being more aware of the intention of building trust. Because when you have to say the things that nobody else will say to someone, that's where trust will allow that person to hear you, right? And Devon, what he's talking about in a group setting is even more important. And I so love that story, Devon, of like it's really important because it's true. In case you haven't led a group yet or worked in a corporate setting, there's always one person who everybody else in the room is like, do you see this person? Do you see? They're looking at you like, don't you see how much they laugh in a weird way that interrupts everybody? Don't you see how they take over and they share too much? Don't you see that? And they're waiting for you to like subtly align with them. They're just waiting. And that takes real skill not to align with them. It takes real skill and real consciousness, right? So we've got a couple of things going on here. Let's see what people are saying. Like, oh, Alex, Alex has a question.
Go ahead.
From that scenario, is that something you would try to, is that something you would try to get that disruptive person in a private conversation or explore with them in front of the group?
Yeah, so great question. So I don't want to like be an overcorrector, right? So like this is kind of, I had a woman in a training, and everything she did on like the first half of the day, the answer was like, I don't know, I'm on the fence, right? And so, Alex, I don't want to pull them personally I want that if I'm running a group, it's important that starts playing out in the group. I don't want to address it. I want to allow it to play out in the group and not kind of give extra attention to it, because like look, I'm a stand for transformation in people, but there's also an energy of like, hey, if you don't want to get this, if you want to be miserable in the corner, none of my business. You ain't hurting me, right? Now that's not, I know, because I trust my coaching in the process that I'll be able to get them there. So I wouldn't do it in a private. I would allow it to come up until I knew in the room it was just too loud not to address. And then I would address it with permission as a teachable moment. And that's how I usually do. And sometimes the teachable moment don't come across as nice. They're straight. They're not mean. They're not nice. They're just straight. And one woman I had to say, like, how's this working? This is in every part of your life. You're on the fence with everything. And when I'm talking about leadership, I've said in some conversations, in organizations, some of us need to grow up. Because we're feeling away, and you think you're punishing me by not participating, you're only punishing you. Like, you have to be willing to have that kind of straight talk as a teachable moment. That woman transformed in that conversation. She was taking it. By the next day, she was like a whole different person, because nobody was willing to have that conversation. And that's what I'm here for. I'm a stand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do this. First of all, let us know if that's helpful, right? It's always good to know, like, is that helpful? Like, how do you want to get on the court in your own practice with both sharing more honestly, straight talk, but also being sensitive to, is the trust built in that, right? And there's a lot of nuance in that, right? There's a lot of nuance, because Devon, you said something a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was really important. You said that transformation starts before the coaching engagement begins, right? So you're really talking about in the enrollment conversation.
Big time.
Right.
Big time.
So that's a fine line, right? Because we're simultaneously building trust, and we may also be saying, I'm going to say something maybe nobody's ever said to you before, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the willingness to know, like, everyone I know, like, game changer, you got to be willing. Sometimes clients aren't going to like what you say. I've been in situations, and I see some people about, you have to be careful not to embarrass. I'm not out to embarrass anyone. And I've been in rooms where I got called out. I felt embarrassed. However, me sitting in that embarrassment was the best thing that ever happened, because then it gave me a choice. Do I want to sit in here and make them wrong and be a victim, or do I step up and say, what can I learn in this? And that's what that woman did. So I wouldn't be so, like, worried about being embarrassed, because sometimes we got to get out of that initial shock of all those layers that we're like telling people this, come help me, but we're pushing them away. So sometimes it's like being straight. I'm not out to embarrass anyone, and I'm not holding nothing back. If I see something that can serve you and trust is already in the room, I'm not going to let you die. Metaphorically. You know.
I think it's really important, though, because I think that was that statement, right? Like, so I want to slow that down. The person, I think it was Linda, who said, you have to be careful not to embarrass people, right? So I think this is really good to slow down on what Devon just said. So that statement assumes that, let's use Devon, that Devon is responsible for someone feeling embarrassed. See,
Correct.
and if we're really slowing down about how we're being in ourselves with clients, which is what creates deeper coaching, is that I know that I am not responsible for what my client is feeling over there. I'm not responsible, right? So I'm not responsible for their feelings. I'm responsible for how I deliver things, right? So, like, Devon is really willing to take a stand for transformation. And even if he's strong with someone, the delivery, what's underneath that is love.
Yeah.
It's love.
Always.
So he knows that if someone's embarrassed, it's not coming from, that wasn't his intention, and he's not delivering things in a way that are shaming, right? And that doesn't mean someone won't feel embarrassed. And it doesn't mean the embarrassment wouldn't serve them.
Yep.
But he can't control that over there. That's not our job. We can't control how someone's going to receive our coaching. And that's a really important thing to get. There's a lot of freedom in getting that we can't control how someone receives our coaching. We can only control how we deliver it.
That's it. Like Janet, I see what you're. Thanks, Janet. Janet said, for someone who, I just missed a comment, but she experienced it, and she said, can you find Janet's comment?
So Janet said, very helpful from someone who was enlightened but suffering. Some straight talk from Devon that was transformative.
Yeah.
And then Crawford said, I like the words, I'm going to share something that nobody has ever said to you before. Talk about creating that container.
Yeah. So the container, I don't just jump into that. Like Carolyn said, like we're talking about enrollment. We're talking about if you're doing a group, I set the container early of like types of listening. We create agreements, right? I give them options that, listen, I'm going to push you outside of your comfort zone, and we're not going to go into an area that's going to be really a danger zone for you. Like, so that, and they steer the ship. So when I get to that question or comment, Crawford, it's like there's a container already set. Then I can ask the question with some permission.
Right.
Are you willing to hear something? I'm going to share something with you that no one's probably willing to tell you, and they may see. And and you didn't hire me here to hold this back. Are you open for it? And somebody can, and I always tell people, when I ask people a question, there's really 3 answers: yes, no, or counter offer. So you can say, yes, I want to hear it. No, or I want to hear it, but not right now. I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And those are all good. Those are all good.
Okay.
And that's all good. All 3 of them are just as good as each one. There's no right, wrong, good, or bad. And that's, I think, showing up without an agenda. Like truly trusting that like they're going to make that decision, their choice, and what they're willing to step into. And from that, you have a powerful container. Because then they trust you even more, that you can go anywhere with them, and they have an option to say, no, not right now, later, or yes.
One of the things I think that's also helpful, Devon, in terms of how do we take our coaching to how do we create more impact in our coaching, right? It's like, we've talked over the last 3 conversations of like, how would I get accurate with how I'm being as a coach, right? And I think there's an opportunity for everyone who's here today, anybody watching the replay. It's like, are you asking, how's the coaching going? Like, how is this going for you, right? Because the one thing that is true in my experience is that we don't always know what is happening with our client because we're only getting one view of them, the person who shows up in the room with us, right? We don't, unless we're in a corporate coaching environment where we can get some feedback from other people about someone. People do that in corporate environments. Leaders do 360s, and there's all those things where we can find out more about what's happening with our client. But often we're not. So we're only seeing and hearing what they bring into the room, right? So we have to ask questions that will allow us to get more data, both on the impact of the coaching. One of my favorite questions, by the way, I'll share this one, is, I'll be working with someone and I'll be like, so let's slow this down. And if they're in a relationship, married, girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, I'll be like, if your partner were here, what would they say about how you're doing with this thing?
Beautiful question,
Carol. It's a fantastic question. You can also ask it this way. If your kids were in this room, what would they be saying about how this is going? And if your person is like, I don't know, I'm like, time to ask. Time to ask. Right? Anytime your client is in close relationships, spouses, children, parents, right? Like if you're coaching a young person, what would your parents say if they were in the room with us? Oh, my parent would say, I don't do my chores. I don't do this. And I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
So find out, like, if you don't know yet, find out who the important people are in their lives and ask them. Be like, so what would so-and-so say about what they're seeing right now? Like, I have clients who've been like, I have a client who literally will say to me, and I've never met their spouse. I've never talked. They're like, their spouse literally says things to them like, did you talk to Carolyn about this? Like, before we do this, did you talk to her yet? And that's a sign that like the coaching is having an impact in their family.
Yep.
If you're like a known entity in the house, that's a sign of transformation is occurring. And I don't say that to like tout, like I'm not trying to like look at me. It's like we want you to have data points.
Yeah, and we're gonna break down data points at the main event. We have a whole 8 practices, right?
Yeah. Well, 8
Yep.
so far. Devon and I are not done yet. But right now we have 8 practices that a coach who is on the path to mastery / really transformative coaching, there's 8 practices a coach would be doing.
Yeah, we have that. And then one of my favorite ones that we're going to have is this activity on blind spots that nobody has seen before. Yeah.
Jennifer Butler just said, I wrote that down, Carolyn. First of all, Linda, so this is a shout out to Arza. My husband asked me recently, what would Arza say? Boom. Boom, Arza. That means there's something happening in the coaching you're doing. Let's see. Let's see. I'm looking for some questions. There was somebody had a question and it disappeared. Devon is Crawford's thanking you. The right place, asking permission when the container was set. Oh, that client that annoyed me all the time. That was the only thing that kept me going. He always said a yes, even though I thought he was a no.
Carrie Brito in the house.
Yeah.
Carrie?
Yeah. All right. So
yeah, any other? So I got something.
Okay.
So we got about 11 minutes. This is our third one, and then you won't see us unless you join us either live in LA at April 1st or 2nd or via Zoom. So if you can't make it to LA, you're going to want to be in the room where it happened, even if it's on Zoom. So in the last like 7-8 minutes, I think, is there any questions that you have for Carolyn and I that you just want answered? What's the question you've been wanting to ask that you've been holding back? Anything.
That's right. Burning questions that keep you up at night about your practice, about your coaching. Like, what would be the most helpful if this last, whatever it is, 10 minutes were the most powerful 10 minutes that we could change your coaching practice? What would you ask us? Let's hear it.
Y'all are coaches.
Yeah, while they're busily typing away. So let's give them one practice. You already have gotten some since if you've been at all the conversations here, you've already gotten some. So a coach,
we're up to like 6 or 7 now.
Right. But a coach who's on the path to mastery, number 1 is getting coached.
Yep.
Getting coached. So you've got a coach, you get coached regularly, and you don't just get coached by one person, right? Because like, look, many people know I've been coached by Steve Chandler for a really long time, right? But I don't just have Steve Chandler's voice in my head, right? I've got Nancy Klein, I've got Mary Holnick, I've got Ron Holnick, I've got books I've read, I've got Devon, I've got people that I consider trusted sources of input, trusted sources of transformation, trusted sources of seeing things differently. All right, some questions are coming in.
And I have, my coach is Steve Hardison. My old coach that I started with was Steve Chandler. I still go to Steve Chandler at times. I got Carolyn. I work with Werner Earhart. Byron Katie, I'm really close. Like Byron Katie is one of my biggest teachers. So it's like part of not only just getting a coach, but we're going to talk about sharpening the saw a little bit at the main event. So what questions do you have?
How do you stop clients from going so far into story? You want to answer that one, Devon?
Yeah, well, there's many ways, right? So it's not just one way. One of the things is identifying, like, they have to identify it's a story or it's not a story. So a lot of coaches, they say they're in a story, but if the person who's in it isn't identifying that it's a story, then it's not a story. It's just your judgment of what's going on. So you want to how I do it, Janet, is really slow people down and show the distinction of what actually happens in as is reality. Like I'll literally tell me what happened. And then I'll give them another distinction of like, this is what happened. And what are you making this mean? And now they have these two competing things of like, this is what happened. This is my story. And I'll slow them down and saying, which one of this is real? like, which one is like real life happening? And they'll say, well, that. So then they can have a distinction of what you mean by story, rather than telling people this is a story. It's their interpretation. It's their, so like when they realize, listen, you're relating to people not from what happened, you're relating to people from the story you created. So you're in fantasy world. So you have to like slow them down so they can see the distinction between what really happened and as is reality and what they're making it mean. Until you do that, you can't just tell someone they're in a story.
So do you
Does that
hear
help?
do you hear the difference there? Devon's not telling them they're in a story. He's slowing it down to help them distinguish between a story and what's real. So that's really important. Okay, another question from Alex, which is like how do you look for a coach? Like, how do I let me see if I can get to it again.
Great to hear, Janet. She said she got it.
All right. What do you look for when selecting your own coach? I ask as an insight to what it looks like to create clients of your caliber.
You want me to answer that, or you want to?
Sure, no, go for it.
Yeah, so when I was looking for the coach, I'm looking for someone, like, I want to be in a room. If I'm the smartest in the room, I'm in the wrong room. So I wanna find someone who's developed a level of mastery that I want to get to one day. Now, a second requirement, it isn't like, it's just my requirement, is the people have to be reasonably happy, in my opinion. Like, I don't want to be around miserable, doom and gloom, serious people. So like for me, that's just a requirement for me. Like someone I want to actually be around and learn from, right? But the number one requirement is really, they've achieved the level of mastery that I want to get to. So when I found Steve Chandler, I read the book Prosperous Coach, and I just started stalking him. And I stalked him. I was like, wow, this guy. And I just read and listened to everything. And then I eventually got in a conversation and asked him to coach me. So I want someone who's where I want to be, and that I can kind of like pattern my game after until I get my own game. And so someone who's like got that combination of really, and I want someone who's fully in this profession. I don't want like a part-time, half-ass coach, because I'll become a part-time, half-ass coachee. So for me, it's like I want someone who's at the top of the game, not in an ego sense, just in a level of mastery that I want to emulate.
Right. My answer is essentially the same, Alex. It's like I look for people when I'm looking. It's like I want someone who's further down the path than me, who has been through things I haven't been through yet. I have a joke right now that, having lost both my parents in a very short amount of time, I'm like, okay, who's ahead of me in this, that's been through this, that can help me find my bearings in this, right? So I've got Steve Chandler, and, I'm doing work with Nancy Klein, and I've done work with Mary Hulnick. It's like, these are all people who are already past that initial phase of life without parents. And I want people who can show me that terrain, who've done it well, not just doing it, but people who've mastered it and like transcended it, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm looking for when I want a coach who's already been down the path I've been down and has done it well in my eyes. Alethea, I want to answer your question. There are no shoulds. You shouldn't have said something because they had profound shifts and insights. It's like, some people are a long game. My question for you would be, have you written them a really thoughtful email where you reflected the possibilities that you see in them? Have you done that yet? And if you haven't, that's what I'd be focused on.
And stop shitting on yourself.
Yeah, no shitting. We would double click on that with you, by the way. Linda, if you need a certified coach for your school and you're trying not to compare them to Arza, I mean, how could you compare them to Arza? Hello, ours is like the best. I would say to Arza, hey, who do you know that's a certified coach that is at least remotely maybe as good as you. Like, because Arza knows coaches who are certified. So Arza, your coach, can get you to someone to meet that requirement. Okay. So if that's a necessity, because of course I'd be like, just coach with Arza, who cares? But if you need that for your certification, it's a good experience, right? It's a good experience. And there are certified coaches in my school who are great coaches, just like Arza. Arza can get you to someone. Just ask her, ask your coach.
And she had from Australia, we only got 2 minutes. She had a question about where do we have a lot of success finding clients. So we have a whole like thing dedicated for the main event. Initially, we have just, for us, we found clients everywhere, in emails and text messages and Facebook, but like we went back the last like 90 days in our emails and our texts and say, who was I in communication with? You could find clients right there. As you become a master, get mastery in this profession, Dana, what'll happen is and we're going to have a whole thing on this in the main event of how do we create the impact? So now the referrals come from renewals and referrals. And that's the next phase of mastery as a coach. And we're going to show how to get from there where you at to where you want to be.
That's the gap, right? That Devon's talking about. But I want to say something else, Dana. Wherever you are is where clients are, right? Wherever you are. So my early clients came from the gym. They came from past professional relationships. And they came from me slowing down and seeing who was in my world that I wasn't paying attention to. That's really what Devon's talking about. So first of all, we did it, Devon. We are complete. Look at him with his green sneakers with 3 conversations. So we want to acknowledge everyone who's come to 1, 2, or 3 of these. We want to encourage you to go forth and utilize what you got here. And I don't know when you'll see Devon and I again on a Facebook Live. So this could be like, it could be it. You need to say goodbye to us. You may never see us again on a Facebook Live. Who knows? But either way, we acknowledge anyone who's come over the past 3 conversations. If you're watching this replay, we acknowledge you. And for those of you that are already registered for the main event, we can't wait to see you there. If you're still on the fence, almost time to get off the fence. And even if you got everything you needed, which is fabulous, like bravo. We hope you got everything you could from this.
Carolyn, it's been fun. I'll see y'all April 1st and 2nd in LA at the main event. Love you. Thank you for spending time with us. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.